welcome back to Washington Commanders Insider. Today we're talking about day 9 of training camp for the Washington Commanders. And so we'll be talking about the key insights and the standouts from today's practice. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, just like Jaden Daniels is going to be hitting Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, Zach Ertz, and many others for multiple touchdowns this upcoming season. And so in exchange for hitting that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Washington Commanders. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Washington Commanders Insider family as we talk nothing but Washington Commanders football. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it, as we are going to be talking about a lot of everything here in day number 9 of training camp for the Washington Commanders. And so just to start off, before we jump into what Dan Quinn had to say before practice here, this is going to be the last practice before they head out to New England for the joint practices here. And then Friday is going to be the first preseason game for the Washington Commanders. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into what Dan Quinn had to say to the press here before practice. And so just paraphrasing this and looking at some of the key points that he talked about here. And so he did say that, they're looking to do another install, and then also too, still looking to work on the end of game situations and the end of half situations. And so that is something that Dan Quinn likes to throw out there in practices. But get a key insight here that they're still working on the install here on the offense and the defensive side of the ball. And so next thing here, injury update with Brandon Coleman. And so the last time we talked about Brandon Coleman, he did limped off the field. That is what the reports were saying there. So it looks like that he was not out at practice today. And so he did say that we will probably get an update on him, I think, Wednesday. And so that is something that we'll definitely keep you posted here. And so as soon as some news drops about Brandon Coleman, we'll definitely be talking about that. But as of right now, Coach Dan Quinn said that he was going to be out for today's practice. Next up, he talked about the defense, or at least he was asked about the defense, and just really talking about what he's been pleased with. And so he talked about the emphasis on man-to-man, and he was talking about really in the spring, I guess they do a lot of zone work or something like that. And then he was talking about the communication has been really good, talking about the rotation being used. And so he's talking about the versatility of the defense and just generally how I guess they've been subbing players out and utilizing that well. And then he also said that, look, they are a long way to going out there and just finding out how good they are tackling. And he's like, the test is to see, what you can and cannot do in practices here. And so talking a little bit there about the defenses and things like that, that takes us into the next point where he's talking about joint practices here. And so he's excited for it because he's talking about you get a chance to look at different styles. You get a chance to go against different defensive fronts and actually defensive fronts and offensive fronts. So you get a chance to see another team here that you have not seen. And so he wanted to go ahead and emphasize that when he was asked about what he's looking for here in these joint practices. Next, he's asked about Johnny Newton. And so Johnny Newton comes up here and he said that, look, he has stayed healthy. And so this is a lot better start for him than it was last season because remember, he was dealing with the foot injury there. And so that kind of set him back there a little bit early to start off the season. But talking about how the year has been different for him. And then also too, getting reps to feature him. And he talked about how he is showing some great quickness, which is something that we know about Johnny Newton. So I'm super excited about him. Then he was asked something about Terry McLaurin. And so he says that there is no timeline on Terry McLaurin at this point in time, and that they are not going to skip the process when it comes to ramping him up. And so he said the thing with him, it's about going out there and running hard routes. And so, seeing can he like decelerate and kind of come out of that for like comebacks and stuff like that. That'll be like a pretty good indicator. But that was really the update that he gave us here about Terry McLaurin and the possible return back to the field at this point. Next, talks about Bobby Wagner and talks about him being disciplined with his work ethic, which is something that we definitely know about Bobby Wagner. And so that is one of the insights that he talked about there. And then he talked about Laramie Tunsil and Brandon Coleman and just the versatility there, because I think he was asked about running behind those players on a 3rd-and-1 situation. And he said that they're unique. He talks about how flexible that they are. And so I'm just waiting to see what this offensive line is going to look like, because, again, we know that they are going to face some blitzes and things like that. But I think the key for the Washington Commanders offensively, as great as Jaden Daniels is you've got to be able to run the football. And so hopefully we get a chance to see some of those principles here on preseason, on the preseason opener here on Friday. And so another thing that he gives us here in this press conference before practice is that Sam Cosmi, the week 1 is still on the table. So him possibly being ready for week 1 is still on the table. He talked about the fact that quad strength is going to be huge, coming back from the injury that he came back from. And also, too, he's still got to do or he's doing a lot of field work. And at some point in time, those practice reps are really what's going to matter the most. But right now, he's hitting all the marks. And so we continue to keep hearing that about Sam Cosmi, which is a good thing. Next up here, talking about good practices and really what kind of shows him what a good practice is. And he was like, for him, he's always looking for the team or players to finish at the end of plays, and also too looking at the communication. He's looking at execution, and he's also had to tell himself that as a coach that failing is part of the process, and so the false starts and things like that is part of it. And then he also talks about the sense of urgency and energy that you must have out there, and so urgency and not to rush or not to mistake that with hurry. And so talks about those being 2 different things. And also, too, he was just like, look, at the end of the day, when you are in a practice, every play someone's winning, and then you also have someone losing. That's an everyday process. And so I thought that was a great way to look at it. And just another way to kind of look at it when it comes down to just, okay, hey, the defense dominated, the offense dominated. At the end of the day, there's going to be a win on both sides of the ball every day. And so next up, talking about just wanting to go ahead and push it as far as the red zone and end zone work. So he was asked about that because he's like, look, you're going against obviously the situation yourself there. You're going against the clock. You're going against your defense. And so he likes to push it through those situations. And so next thing he talks about here is Joe Whitt Jr. and just talking about really the whole defense here. And so, or actually that is Joe Whitt Jr. So that leads us to the next segue, which is Joe Whitt Jr. And so Joe Whitt Jr. talks to the press here after practice, and he was talking about what has really kind of impressed him. And he was like, just the whole defense. He wants to see them go out there and compete against another team. And so, you get accustomed to what you're seeing, as far as looks and things like that from your own team. But now you get a chance to go out there and see what you can do and see if you can execute those principles against another team that you don't know. And so kind of giving us some insight here as far as what he's looking for against New England in this joint practice. And so the other thing he talks about too is Kane Medrano. And so we've talked about Kane Medrano a couple times, especially since he continues to show up in the standouts and slash notebook here at the end of the shows. But it looks like that Kane Medrano, he said with him, he's carving out a role for himself. He said that he's getting a lot better as far as covering tight ends. And he's also saying that he's showing some physicality. And he said he wants to see if that holds up. And so he said that it's kind of a mix of Frankie Louvu and then also too Jeremy Chin. And so that is very interesting here with Kane Medrano. And I've said this before with him, I wonder what it's going to look like once he gets out there into the box, because that's going to be a different type of, situation for him, especially, coming from college into the National Football League. Guys hit harder. It's a lot faster and things like that. So being able to really get through the trash and make plays like that, and then also to show what he's already shown before, which was his ability to cover. But man, if he can show that he can get in the box and be physical like this, yes, he could definitely carve out a role here. And so next thing he talks about is Von Miller. And so he said that Von Miller really putting on a teaching clinic when it came down to the classroom. And again, just kind of paraphrasing this. And he just talks about the fact that he can still get it done. So still looking good out there in practice and sharp as far as being a pass rusher. He gives mention here to Marshawn Lattimore. I love this part where he said that, look, the biggest thing for him is that he is out there. And also, too, he was just talking about just how much of a dog he is as far as competing out there. And so I think that this is something that we know with Marshawn Lattimore, the fact that he'll go out there and compete his tail off. But he talks about him being a press player, still able to hold the vertical control, good feet and everything like that. But it sounds like the biggest thing here is that he definitely praised him for going out there and just trying to do everything he could for this team to help them win last season. But he's encouraged with the fact that he's out there. It sounds like that he's healthy. And also, too, I'll be talking about him towards the end of the show when we look at standouts. And so, yeah, Marshawn Lattimore looking pretty good here. So the next thing, too, that I liked about Joe Whitt Jr. and his presser is he's talking about the urgency and just really the importance to play 11-man football on defense. And he was talking about the run defense. Really, it wasn't just one aspect that just failed last season, but really it was all levels. And so he said that they've got to get better at all three levels and playing better as one. And so I love to hear that here with Joe Whitt Jr., giving us a little emphasis here on the defense. Then next, he talks a little bit about Johnny Newton. And so with Johnny Newton, he emphasizes that he's healthy. He also talks about the fact that he had a good day today. And so I guess he had some very good wins up front there. And then also, too, he said that the whole group is getting better. So he didn't necessarily want to single out a player, but wanted to emphasize that the whole group is getting better. But he does mention Johnny Newton. And then when he's asked about what a good practice is here, he was talking about for him, there's certain situations where, he'll call a play and it's going to put some stress on the defense, but it's about, can they send the ball where it needs to go? And then also, too, certain plays are designed to take some stuff away. So whether it's taking a boundary away, whether it's taking away, that run or whatever the case may be. So being able to go out there and win in those competitive situations, and then also to execute the defense and do what it's supposed to do is really what I got out of that. And so you get some more insight there with Joe Whitt Jr. And then next, he talks a little bit more here just about, going against a new group in the joint practices and stuff like that, how you were used to just going against the home team. So, playing your style of ball and seeing if it really travels, which I love that, which I do think that is really what it's going to be all about in preseason, because regardless of who's out there, if it's the starters or whatnot, which we know it's not going to be, you have to be able to really emphasize what you want to run on both sides of the ball. Bring that principle. What does your physicality, does it carry, from preseason all the way up to the end of the season? And so this is going to be an important first step for the Washington Commanders heading into this joint practice here. And the next thing that I like that he talks about here is he talks about think fast, play fast, physical up front. Everybody plays and gets downhill and things like that. So, just really, he was talking about the fact that they don't necessarily practice as hard they practice hard, but they don't practice as long. So they practice extremely hard, don't practice as long. And he was like, at the end of the day, everybody here plays and gets down the way that they want to. So going back, I kind of messed it up, but yeah, he's saying that everybody in the building plays and gets down the way that the Washington Commanders want to play. And so it sounds like this goes back into what I was saying, I'd say like some weeks ago, with just having the right personnel, having the right group for the type of defense and the way that you want to execute. And so this is why I really do anticipate that this defense is going to be a lot better than what it was a season ago. And so next thing here that came up was Kliff Kingsbury. And so Kliff Kingsbury, he talked a bit after practice as well. And so he talks about Deebo Samuel, and he talks about him just competing. He's strong, high speed, the mentality that he's giving the team here. And also, too, just the fact that you can utilize him in so many different ways. Next, talking about Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt. And so yet again, we hear about Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, which is Bill. And he's saying that, look, Bill is showing some flashes out there and things like that. And so that is a good sign. You've caught the eye here of your offensive coordinator. And then he talks about the running backs on the roster. He gives them high praise. And he's like, look, that is a competitive group out there. He's like, these guys are definitely going to be a factor here for this football team. And he also, too, talks about Debo, and how you can kind of utilize him back there, too, as well. And so next thing here, talking about Luke McCaffrey. And so with Luke, he was saying, look, he's come a long way. He's saying that he's playing a little bit more outside than inside, even though he can play both, but he did give praise to him. And it just sounds like that we continue to hear the same thing when it comes down to Luke McCaffrey, is that he's just in a better space here as a wide receiver and just understanding where he needs to be, on the field and everything else. Next thing he talks about is Laramie Tunsil. And so Laramie Tunsil, he was like, look, it's great to have Laramie Tunsil because this allows the team to go ahead and get out into routes and things like that. You can kind of let him go do his thing in one-on-one situations. And so I love to hear that, just with the way that, he's thinking about it as far as putting together an offensive plan and scheme and everything else, because that does make a difference. Because if you don't need to chip a guy and you could just get a guy out into a pass route and everything else, like that definitely helps when it comes down to timing and stuff like that. Josh Connolly Jr., he praised him for making the adjustment from the left side of the line to the right side of the line, so still working there. Jalen Lane, he said that he's fast, got a good understanding of the route tree, and whenever something goes wrong, he's a guy that is going to go out there and immediately correct it. You don't have to tell him several times. And so that was good insight to hear about Jalen Lane. And so he definitely got some praise as well. And so next thing I wanted to go ahead and jump into here is just the takeaways, key standouts, notes here from day number 9. And so there was tons of them here. And so let's start with Debo. And so first of all, with Debo, giving you a little bit of an injury update with him, it looks like that he had a finger issue from what I understand. And so they went ahead. They did have to retape it today, but he had a very nice catch against Jonathan Jones. So it was a nice thrown ball here from Jaden Daniels. And so if you guys want to read about this, you can head over to Commander's Wire. You can also see, the tweets. You can also see the videos and stuff like that associated with that. And so that was the first thing that was a key standout here from practice. Another thing, too, is just Jaden Daniels, man. It sounds like that he has just been accurate. He is throwing some dimes out there. And so getting some good insight there. It looks like that Chris Moore had a nice catch off an RPO from Jaden Daniels. And so Jaden Daniels showing he's comfortable here in year 2, putting the ball where it needs to be. Next up, another mention here of Bill. So it looks like that making a nice cut and getting into the second level was mentioned in this article. And so I cannot wait to see him when it comes down to preseason football. I think that he's going to get a lot of reps, and I think that he can take a real serious step towards RB1. Next thing that I saw here that was interesting, again, in that Commander's Wire piece, as far as the standouts, you saw Frankie Louvu and then Bobby Wagner. It looks like that they're pushing the weighted kind of stability ball back and forth there. And so I thought that that was an interesting type of drill there. So seeing iron sharpen iron. Next up, another insight that it gives us here is that B-Rob was back there with the punt returners. And so I think that that's interesting. Matt Gay, the kicker, hit a 50 and a 55-yard field goal. So he definitely has a big leg, which is something that was talked about. Talking a little bit more here about Marshawn Lattimore. And so with Marshawn Lattimore, I got a chance to see a clip where he's simulating tracking the football. And so it looks like that somebody's throwing the football from the top of a staircase kind of thing. And then like what he's doing is he's coming up like he's hitting somebody in coverage and then just backpedaling and looking for the ball. And so I thought that that was cool to see him kind of working on the sideline there. And so I'm just looking forward to seeing Marshawn Lattimore now that he's healthy. Another thing, too, that you can see within that piece is that Trey Amos makes, I think, an incredible interception. It says that he was in tight coverage with Chris Moore. It looks like that it was a back shoulder throw from Jaden Daniels. And I guess Trey Amos was able to get to that back shoulder and get the pick. And so Trey Amos is another guy that I'm looking forward to seeing here when it comes down to week 1 of preseason. Next thing, the defense. And so got a chance to see the defense just kind of working at the bag. It looks like that they're doing a whole bunch of counter moves and things like that. So you see defenders kind of coming up, initially hitting the sled and then kind of pushing off that and working their way towards back to the quarterback, which is actually just the practice dummy there. Saw swim moves, spin moves, things like that. And so that was good to see with the defense as they're kind of ramping it up and things like that as they get ready for this joint practice. And so those were the key insights from today's practice there. A lot of stuff going on here, but sounds like everything's trending in the right direction. There were some players that did not practice, and so we'll definitely be back here with an update if there were any major injuries. But right now, it looks like that Deebo Samuel is good to go because he looked great out there. And then also, too, we will find out a little bit more about Brandon Coleman as he was not out there. And so we haven't got necessarily an update about that. So anyway, you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking here about day number 9 of training camp, as we are so close from an actual football game for this team. And I know it's preseason, but I don't care. It means that we're one step away or one step closer, I should say, until the season opener. And so anyway, you guys let me know what the key insights were for you. And as we always say, look, go Commanders, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.